is Jeanne Klein, and I'm the coordinator of the Master Gardeners Public Speakers Bureau. And today we have Sandra Siebert, who's a very experienced master gardener who has this amazing garden, vegetables and flowers, and includes lots of edible flowers. So she is going to delight us today with her topic, her suggestion: please eat the nasturtiums. Take it away, Sandra.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I guess a lot of times we overlook things that are just right there in front of us, like using flowers in our foods. You can use many flowers are edible, and you can use them in salads, to garnish desserts, and some of them you can even use in cooking. So I'm going to go through, I've got a lot of photos of flowers, edible flowers, but there's a few more, a lot more than what I've got photos of, just because it would have been like 100 photos if I took more. But at the end, then I'll have a list, which is certainly not complete, that you can look at and say, oh yes. One of the things you can do is make your flower garden do double duty, as well as your vegetable garden. I plant edible flowers in and among my vegetables a lot of times, and there are many flowers that are put in just for ornamental purposes, but you can eat them just as well. First, I'm going to start with wild foraging. In the springtime, you can go and wild forage a lot of different things. This photo was wild forage early in the spring. It shows some cleavers up at the top and some, I can't remember the name. But then the flowers are red buds. Yes, red buds are edible, and they are, because the trees are legumes, the flowers have a very mild pea-like flavor. I learned about this from a friend of mine who goes out foraging wild buds in the spring, and she likes to sprinkle them on top of her buttered toast. I like to toss them into salads or on top of anything cold. And there's your red bud in the wild before it's picked. Violets, wild violets that pop up everywhere and drive you crazy because they're all over your lawn and they're in your garden. Not only are the young leaves edible, but the flowers make beautiful garnish for any salad or any other dish. And they're tame relatives, they're domesticated relatives, Johnny jump ups, pansies, all of the violas, the flowers are edible. Some of them are small. These are a fairly small one, but the large pansies can make quite a statement. And this is a picture of some foraged greens with some violets in it. Another spring delight is forsythia, which I didn't realize until earlier this year, but the forsythia blooms also can be edible. And they're a little larger, and they can make a dramatic impact on a salad, or to go along the side of something hot. There's a lot of different ways you can use these. They don't have to just be in salads. You can use them to top open-faced sandwiches or any vegetable dish. You can put them, make little decorative bouquets alongside of a piece of chicken or some other hot vegetable dish. And some of the hardier flowers, you can just put them right on top of your hot vegetables or whatever your hot meal is. But you want to do that at the very last minute before serving so they don't wilt down. And another spring one, a domesticated one, is chive blossoms. chives put on these beautiful, beautiful little purple globes of flowers. And the flowers, yes, they do indeed taste like chives. In fact, they're a little bit stronger hint of that chive, oniony chive flavor than the leaves give you. You can either use the whole head as a dramatic garnish, or you can just pull all the little florets off and just sprinkle them on top of things. It's quite delightful. We love springtime when we can start decorating our food with flowers. And this is a picture of one of my salads with various flowers on it. There's that little yellow oxalis, sometimes called sour grass, that you find popping up in the lawns. That's another wild forage. And there are chive blossoms and the wild columbine, and then a little pansy, really black pansy there at the top. As you can see, this just adds a nice hit of color to your salad before you're getting the colorful vegetables like tomatoes and peppers. And a note on when you're wild foraging or using any kind of flowers, you want to be sure you're getting your flowers from some place, from a lawn or another area that has not been sprayed with chemicals. You don't want to eat any of that stuff. The flowers are too delicate to wash anything off of them. So you want to be very careful about where you are collecting wild or even domesticated flowers and make sure that they are clean. You can also forage things from the roadway. Sometimes there's different edible ones that are popping up alongside the road, but you don't want to do it along a road that is well traveled. If it's occasionally got a car going up and down, it should be okay. But when you have a lot of cars going by, you have all of that exhaust and other toxins that are aerosolized from a moving vehicle, and they can settle on everything that's growing along the roadside. Plus, if it's a well-traveled gravel road, even if it's not real well-traveled, you can, in a dry time, you get a lot of dust settling on them, and you really don't want to eat all that dust. So be very cautious about where you are getting your flowers from, and do not use florist flowers. If you go to the florist section of a grocery store or go to an actual florist, don't eat those. I have no idea what they spray on those things to keep them pristine. So be very careful. And yes, these are lilacs. Lilacs too are edible. They have a very perfumey, aromatic, well, you know what they smell like, at least the ones that do have a fragrance. And they're very lovely. Just pull the little flowers off of the bunches and sprinkle them on top. And grape hyacinth too. And yes, your apple blossoms. You want to pull the petals off of your apple blossoms because the centers will be kind of bitter and tough to chew. But sprinkling apple blossoms on top of a dark chocolate cake, that is really beautiful. And every culinary herb, their flowers are edible too, and not just by the bees. You can cut sprigs of thyme flowers and just lay the whole little bunch of flowers alongside for a garnish, or you can just pull off the individual flowers and sprinkle them on top, and they will give a thyme flavor to your food. So this would be, the culinary herbs are excellent for sprinkling on top of savory dishes. And roses. Apples and roses are related, and rose petals are definitely edible. You want to pull them away from the centers because those will be hard and kind of bitter. And some say you want that little white piece where the petal connects to the center. Some say that you want to cut that off because it's bitter. I have not noticed that, but you try it. I eat a lot of bitter greens and stuff, so I am not very sensitive to bitterness and things. So you might want to try it before you actually do it. And to preserve some delicate flowers, like really pretty delicate flowers and petals, like rose petals and pansies, you can candy them. I have not tried this because it's a process, but if you have a special occasion that you want to decorate some lovely pastry or dessert with flowers, this is a way that you can preserve them and add a little sweetness. What you do is you beat up an egg white in a bowl and take a little, and then you have a bowl of sugar alongside it, and you gently hold your flower or your petal and dip a paintbrush in the egg white and paint the flower and or petal with the egg white, and then sprinkle sugar evenly over it on both sides. Then you place them not touching on a piece of wax paper and let it dry until they are completely dry. And then you can store them, and you don't want any moisture in there. So if you've got kind of a warm but not hot place with some good air circulation, you want them, put them there so they are completely dry by the time they are done. And then, and this says 12 to 36 hours, depending on what the humidity level is. Or if you happen to have one of those old-fashioned ranges with a pilot light in your oven, you can just stick them in there for that for a while, or set it at 150 to do 200 degrees with the door ajar until they are dry. And then you store them in an airtight container until you need them. This way you can preserve your May harvest of flowers until your extravaganzas in December or something like that. And you can go to your vegetable garden and find lots of edible flowers. These are arugula flowers, and they taste like arugula, but without some of the heat that you can get in the leaves by the time that they're putting on their flowers. So just snip them off and toss them on your salad or on top of your whatever you're serving. And you have a nice mild arugula flavor along with a very pretty show. And if you want to pick your arugula flowers and save them for later, pick them with a long stem and put them in a vase with water, and they will keep for a fairly good while. Cilantro flowers are another thing. They give this beautiful lacy appearance to your arrangement. And the first time I started using cilantro flowers, of course, they do better. They have more of an impact if you are using them with some flower that's a little larger. But I thought it looked like a beautiful bridal kind of arrangement just because they were so lacy and pretty. And these are flowers. This is probably kale flowers or collards or something like that. Some member of the cabbage mustard family, they put up these stalks of yellow flowers that, yes, they're edible too. They don't have, so if your broccoli, for some reason, your broccoli, you don't cut the heads in time and they start putting out these little flower stalks, go ahead and let them bloom and use the flowers. And yarrow, this is one that most people will just plant for ornamental purposes because it's a native plant. Those flowers are edible. I would use the individual flowers and not the whole head of flowers. They will be a little bit bitter, so you want to use them sparingly unless you really like bitter foods. But that'd be really pretty, and you can find yarrow in a variety of colors, the pastels and the cerises, and there's a really scarlet looking yarrow. So these could have quite a nice little color impact on a plate. And yarrow is used medicinally. It's very good for healing wounds and such like. It used to be called poor man's pepper because it's kind of bitter, peppery flavor that they use the leaves for. That was used to season foods in a time when pepper just was not affordable by every single person. And this is calendula. I don't know how many people actually grow calendula. I grow it quite a bit because the flowers are used medicinally for wound healing and on rashes and stuff. But it used to also be used to season and even color foods in place of saffron, which is far, far, far more expensive than planting a couple of packets of calendula. Calendula likes to get started when it's a little cool, so short after frost, but not too much after. When the soil is not heated up too much, you want to plant it. I have also tried planting it a little later in the season because sometimes when it gets really hot during July and August, it'll kind of wilt back a little bit and then revive again in the fall. So, but I haven't had a whole lot of luck with planting in the summer for a fall thing. But mine are doing wonderfully right now. And this is elderberry flowers. This is one that you can find domesticated. These are my elderberries. They're at the edge of one of my garden areas. And you can also wild forage these if you're careful about where you harvest them from. They'll have kind of a sweetish flavor, but not a real impact on flavor. And they're just gorgeous when you take a whole lot of them and scatter them over something. They will brown really quickly with heat. So you want to use them on cold dishes, on tops of salads or something like that. And they make a better impact the more when you use a lot of them and then have some other darker colored, larger flowers along with them. And elderberries are too easy to grow. So, and lavender also is a very good edible food. You want to use lavender very sparingly because its flavor is quite potent. Most of the ways that lavender flowers are used is in baked goods. You can like a teaspoon or two and stirred into a white cake batter or sprinkled underneath whatever you're baking. They're usually best with sweets. I've made shortbread with lavender flowers in them, but they are best used with sweets. But they give a nice little. I like putting really highly flavored herbs into salads because you get these little bites of it every so often. It's not something you use them sparingly. It's not something that you want a lot of in there, but you get these little pops of flavor. Clovers, the various clovers also are edible. And here again, you want to pull the little individual florets away from the core, which can be bitter and kind of difficult to digest. And borage flowers. Borage is not very well, I don't think it's grown very much. I have it growing in my strawberry patch because I went to a conference one time, and in their companion planting, they said borage was a really good companion for strawberries. I don't know why, but I have it there anyway. And it produces these beautiful, beautiful little dark blue star-shaped flowers that have a very mild cucumber flavor. And they are fabulous for putting on anything where a little cucumber flavor would enhance it. The bees love the borage too. A lot of the edible flowers are also favored by bees and butterflies. And these are borage and cilantro flowers on top of some avocado toast, and borage and dill flowers on decorating my potato salad. Squash blossoms. They're really nice to use for a truly dramatic impact. You can snip out that little center, the stamens and or the pistils, whether you're getting a male or female flower, and you can stuff them with guacamoles, hummus, baba ganoush, and it's some kind of cheese spread or just feta cheese, and place them alongside whatever you're going to use that stuffing on, and the flowers, or you can just eat the whole flower with the guacamole in it. And if you get out there before the flower blossom opens and you get a female flower, you get a little tiny baby squash, and you can lightly saute these for a little bit of a cooked. And hollyhocks, hollyhock petals, only the petals. You want to cut the petals away from the center of the flower, but the different colors, the pinks, the really deep pinks, and even black hollyhocks, they make a wonderful, wonderful color impact. Sprinkled on a salad, or you can arrange them in a little flower shape on top of something. And this one has a little visitor underneath it. And a close relative, okra. Okra is one of the most versatile plants there is. And it's easy to grow, and when it gets hot and dry, it is one of the few vegetables in my garden that just does not fade. It says, oh, bring on the heat. I love it hot and dry. But you can, like with the hollyhocks, you can snip off the petals and just use the petals, or you can snip out the little center there and stuff the okra flower like you do the squash flower. And these, I always try to plant my okra in a spot that's readily visible because it's such a beautiful plant. And this is a salad full of greens, I think, with the hollyhock and okra petals, some borage flowers, some long bean flower, and cilantro, and some little monarda or wild bee balm flowers, those little long purple things. This is a long bean flower, and they are very elegant and can really dress up a meal. And long beans are another one of those things like okra. I grow them not so much because I like long beans in particular, but although I do, but because when it gets hot and dry, they just keep going and keep producing, and they're just not phased by it. And this is a salad with a bunch of long bean flowers. You can see they're very, very attractive and dramatic and elegant looking. And I think those little dark purple ones might be a red snap bean flower. And then the yellow ones are either cucumber or melon flowers. So your vegetable garden offers you a lot. And these are some toasted rounds with and a butternut squash bowl, all filled with a pesto made out of garden greens and topped with a lot of different flowers. We have arugula, cilantro, dill, violas, borage, and a nasturtium. And here's one of the bean blossoms that, we're not the only ones who like bean blossoms. And this is the wild bergamot, the Monarda fistulosa. This is the native variety of Monarda. And those petals have a nice little fragrant and flavor. You just pull off those little long tubular florets there and just sprinkle them on top of things. And they're also very attractive to bumblebees. And they're a native plant. So if you've got a native plant garden, this is an edible flower that you can use. And here we go, the nasturtiums. My first edible flower experience was with nasturtiums because they are so dramatic on a plate. I once took just a bean salad to a potluck and liberally sprinkled nasturtiums on top of it. And it was like, you can eat these? And everybody was very interested in the flowers, in the edible flowers. Nasturtiums have a nice little spicy pop. And sometimes, especially if you keep the little spurs on the back of them when you pick them, there's a hint of sweetness in there too. When you pick your nasturtiums, you want to like blow into them or shake them out or something, because lots of little tiny bugs like to take refuge inside the nasturtium flower. And those white flowers that are with them are garlic chives. So you can sprinkle your garlic chives on top of them. They'll be blooming in maybe another few weeks. And they give you a nice little hint of garlic flavor to whatever you're decorating them with. And garlic chives are way too easy to grow. Nasturtiums are pretty easy to grow. You want to start them fairly early in the season, but after the last frost, so maybe the end of April, early May. And to get them going really well, to get them to germinate better, you can soak the seeds before you plant them. Just soak them overnight or just for a few hours to get them well hydrated before you plant them. You plant them quarter of an inch deep or something. I like to plant my nasturtiums along the edges of my vegetable beds because they give a nice little decorative appearance. They're more interesting than just, say the tomatoes growing up taller over them or something. And it's a place where you can plant your nasturtiums. You can get nasturtium varieties of nasturtiums to fit really any space. There's some that are very compact, almost miniature. Sometimes the miniature ones are just because the blooms are smaller, but there's a rose-colored one that is a very compact one. And it's very cute, and you can tuck it into a small space, or it might make a nice little container plant. You can grow nasturtiums and a lot of things in containers. There's also bushier ones, semi-trailing ones, and ones that they call climbing or vining nasturtiums. They don't really climb unless you are out there putting them, attaching to your trellis. But those would make a really nice little hanging basket arrangement if you have a pot size that's large enough to accommodate them. So yeah, you can use nasturtiums to fit any kind of landscaping thing, and then you can use them to decorate your plates. If you want to, a lot of these flowers, if you want to pick them in the morning when they're freshest, when they're newly opened, which is the best time for any flower is when they're just freshly opened. You want to, and you want to keep them, just make sure you have plenty of stem attached to the flower and stick them in whatever size vase that you need. It works with nasturtiums and garlic chives, regular chives, arugula, and many of these other ones. A lot of the culinary ones like basil and sage. Sage flowers are a wonderful topping for something like your roasted chicken or some other savory dish. And you can just keep them in a vase. They're pretty and that keeps them longer. Some flowers, if you plucked the flowers off, you can put them in a covered bowl and keep them in the refrigerator for a day or two. But some flowers like cilantro and others tend to just kind of wilt down. So you can't really keep them for very long. And here's another salad with long beans and cilantros, nasturtiums, and monardas. Sunflowers. Sunflowers also are edible. You pull off those big yellow ray petals and use them to garnish things with. And I think in the very centers where each little seed is going to be produced are little tiny individual flowers. Those are actually the fertile flowers. And you can also just scrape them off for a little garnish, but they won't be nearly as dramatic as the ray petals. Also, the sunflower buds, you can grill them, roast them, cook them some way, and they supposedly taste like artichoke. I've been dying to try this, but this year and last year is when I learned about it. And for some reason, I can't get sunflowers going in my garden, although they used to grow up just fine. But the last couple of years, not so much. But next year, I'll get to try roasted sunflower. Also dill. Dill is a nice little accompaniment with that. Gives you a nice, fine, delicate appearance and a little hint of dill flavor. Anise hyssop, which is the genus species name is Agastaki funiculum. It has a nice licorice flavor to it. I use this a lot for tea. Usually the leaves are what I use for tea, but the flowers go into tea too. But the flowers, you can do the whole head for a really good sized pop of licorice flavor in something, or you can just pull off the little individual flowers and sprinkle them on top of things. It's pretty easy to grow, but it does tend to be a short-lived perennial. So you want to be sure you've got some seeding going all along so you can replenish your crop of anise hyssop. And you could dry these flowers for later. They would dry down pretty well and maintain their flavor. And this is another plate full of various things. I think maybe a chicken salad with avocado and various things. And you can see the anise hyssop there on top of the cucumber slice, on top of the pesto on the cucumber slice. And those orange ones are scarlet runner bean flowers. Pea blossoms also are edible, but you don't want to, but sweet pea blossoms are toxic. So you want garden peas, snap peas, long beans, regular shell peas, but not sweet peas. And daylilies. Daylilies can make a dramatic garnish or even part of your dish. Snip out the stamens and pistil and stuff them and set them alongside your meal on your plate. Or you can take the unopened buds and lightly saute them. I've I never seem to get around to doing this because right now I haven't had daylilies growing for a long time. So I'd have to go and steal them from somebody else's garden. But supposedly they have like an asparagus-like flavor when you do that. So go out. You want, like with other ones, you want them freshly opened. Daylilies don't last very long, so you need to get out there right away and take them. And this is mint and peppermint. All these mint flowers are nice little garnishes, especially for desserts. We love to use these to garnish our desserts. And the peppermint goes really, really well with it, something chocolate. And even marigolds, most of the marigolds, the flavor is probably a little too pungent for the average taste bud, but there are certain types of ones that are definitely edible. I believe it's the Signet, Signet type of marigold that has some edible varieties. Look for lemon jam, tangerine jam, and those types of fruity flavored ones. They have a much milder and almost fruity flavor to them. I have grown those, and as you know, marigolds are really, really easy to grow. Also, Mexican tarragon, that is a Tagetes species, just like these marigolds, and it is definitely an edible flower. And goldenrod, even. I know you used goldenrod for teas, but for medicinal teas and such. But until last year, when I found a recipe for goldenrod cornbread, I didn't even think about using goldenrod flowers as edible on my plate. But I should have looked up that goldenrod cornbread recipe, but you can use the flowers and baked goods or just sprinkling alongside. And this is where I need to warn you about allergies. If you or someone who will be eating these has a pollen allergy, you want to be very careful about which flowers you are serving them, especially if they have, anyway, pollen allergies can be quite dangerous if you're not careful. So you want to test small amounts on someone who has an allergy before you just go whole hog and feed them the flowers. You want to make sure that they're not going to have a severe allergic reaction from the pretties on the plate. And rosemary, like all of the other culinary herbs, basil, Thai basil, sage, rosemary, thyme, dill, cilantro, fennel, all of those culinary herbs, their flowers are edible and will give you a hint or even a stronger flavor of that herb. And this is a bowl of soup garnished with all kinds of flowers: calendula, arugula, nasturtium, melon. There's even a little sprig of basil in there. And this is a list that I found the main part of the list on, I can't remember which website, and added a few. And then after I made this slide, I realized, oh wait, this one isn't on there and this one isn't on there. So this is definitely not a complete list. Some of the ones that I know of and have used that are not on the list, I've already mentioned. Those are okra and hibiscus, oxalis, the cucumbers and melons, betony. This right here. Oops. This little thing right here is betony. It's often sold as an ornamental plant, but I also make tea from its leaves, and the flowers are edible. snap beans, long beans, the wild bergamot, the scarlet bee balm, the Monarda didyma. Those are also, and they have a little different flavor than the wild native species. Asters, some of the asters, I know I have eaten the New England aster flowers, but I would not just go out and just start gobbling aster flowers. So you want to stick pretty much to the list that you find, but because you can run across some toxic flowers. Most of the flowers that are not on the edible list are not there mainly because they don't taste very good. They can be extremely bitter or just have a really nasty flavor. But there will be a few that are actually toxic. So I would steer clear of anything that you have not verified. Oh, and one thing that's on this list that I would like to mention is dandelion. I know every time I talk about gardening stuff, I always say dandelions are good things. So the bees can spare a few dandelion flowers. So you want to pull, unless you really like bitter stuff, you want to pull the little yellow florets off of the dandelion head, because the dandelion can be pretty bitter, but the little florets, especially if you get that to them before the bees do, they can be kind of sweet. And I've also seen people, some recipes call for, like with elderberry flowers or with dandelion flowers, you take a whole bunch of them, stir them into a batter and make like a fritter with them. I don't know how much flavor you get from the flower, but it's cool to know that. And another flower that is not on this list that I only just the last couple of days learned is edible are zinnias. Imagine all of those colors sprinkled around on your plate. I found two different sources that reported on their flavor. One source said they're very bland, and another source said that they're pretty bitter. So you don't want to use them in large quantities, but taste test for yourself. Everybody's taste buds are different, and you never know what you might find. So all you need to do is go through your flower garden and your vegetable garden and your herb garden and see what's there and taste test everything that isn't going to make you ill. And use your creative senses. My husband has often said that using flowers to decorate with makes getting a meal ready take a whole lot longer, because especially when you have a lot of choices, because it's like, very creative pastime to decorate with all these flowers. And if you're giving a dinner party or serving a special meal, decorating with flowers just adds that extra little bit of elegance and specialness to the meal. So now I'm ready for some questions. If you have questions about cultivation or anything else as far as your edible flower garden.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Wow, this was just incredible, packed with information, and you are such a artistic cuisine or cuisinaire. I'm trying to come up with the term. The cuisine artist, I guess, is what it would be. Actually beautiful, really lovely. If anyone has questions, since we're a small group, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask Sandra a question or any comments you might have. If no, well, while people are thinking, I sure have some questions as usual.
Yeah, okay.
So can we add hosta flowers to the list?
Yes, I think so, because hosta shoots are edible. So I'm presuming that the flowers were, I didn't think of them, but you can easily do an online search and go hosta flowers edible, and it'll pop up. Somebody will tell you
Sure, because
whether or not they're edible.
I have eaten the leaves, you know, chopped up
Mhm.
with some oils and vinegars and whatnot, and it's kind of like kale, but I've never tried the flowers, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's an idea. Um, uh, the other, so are there also, like, I love your lists of or the main list of all the flowers. Are there also lists of poisonous flowers that are online?
I haven't actually looked for
Okay.
that. I mean, some of them that I would just know right offhand would be any member of the nightshade family. I would steer clear of, like your tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, and any wild or cultivated nightshade. I would steer clear of. Oh, and there's also, it's on the list, but yucca blossoms are edible, and they are supposed to taste like asparagus as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
I wanted to mention them for sure, because I'm sure a lot of people have yucca flowers growing. But if I just say, if you don't know, or if you know that some part of a plant is toxic, I would be very, very cautious about using it. Like pokeweed, I would definitely not use the flowers of pokeweed,
Yeah.
or things uh, like the uh, poison hemlock.
Oh,
Definitely, definitely not. And you need to be careful, because a lot of members of the carrot family, like fennel and carrots and Queen Anne's lace, that kind of thing, you can eat the flowers, but not poison hemlock.
okay.
So you want to be very careful. If you are not sure about a plant, just, I'd say, steer clear.
Did you have echinacea petals on the list?
I did not. I haven't seen anybody include them on the list. I would presume, because we use the whole plant as a medicinal, that they would be edible. I don't know what they taste like.
Right.
They might not be on any list, just because they're a little too bitter for most palates.
Okay. And same thing with rudbeckia, the petals of different rudbeckia. Are they edible, or are they?
I haven't seen them on any of the lists that I've seen.
Okay. All right.
I don't know of Rudbeckia being edible or medicinal at all. So I would just say, well, put it in the vase next to the plate.
There you go. As you were speaking of again, all that, like, for some of the flowers to pull out the inside, oh, come on, you just pistil.
Pistils. Yeah.
Do you have any, like, a pair of small scissors that are bent at the end that you use?
I don't think
Do you know what I mean? Does this pair of scissors exist for that?
Just any small scissors. It's scissors that you use for the most part. What you're doing is cutting them out of the center of large flowers. So you don't really need that small of a pair of scissors to get in there. And I haven't had any trouble snipping them out. Most of the time, I'm just snipping the whole calyx off of the back, and then the stamens and pistils come out, because I'm just using petals. But like with the daylilies and the squash blossoms, I think you can just use any small pair of scissors to do that.
Wow. Okay. And you said you weren't sure if Oriental lilies or Asian lilies were.
Yeah, I think I may have seen them listed as an edible flower somewhere, but it's been long enough ago, I don't remember for sure.
Okay. And what about the petals of poppies? Like, I saw some of your all the wonderful large seed head poppies that you have. Are those petals
I haven't eaten them, and I haven't seen them on any of the lists.
Yeah, because
So-
you know, we talked about the fact that they're the really wild ones, that they're technically opium, the seeds. And so I was just curious to know what the status of the petals would be.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them listed anywhere. There are so many other flowers that.
Thousands, sure. Yeah, exactly. And then do you also use the feathery pieces of asparagus when it goes to seed?
No, no. The for one thing, the feathery leaves are not. You couldn't digest them. You couldn't chew them up, and the berries on them actually are toxic. So
okay. Because I think one of the reasons I've never eaten flowers is I'm just afraid of which is poisonous and which isn't, you know. And then again, the taste. Do you like taste things in the garden, like before you've washed it off, just to take a nibble and see what you think and decide if it's something you want to eat or not?
No. I trust my sources. This is an edible flower. I'll try it.
Okay. All right.
And most of the flowers, with a few exceptions, don't have that much flavor in them. So the other foods that you're going to be eating with them are going to cover up if it's not a flavor you are particularly keen on.
Okay. All right. Pam, Diane, any questions or comments to add?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say thank you, Sandra. It was just so beautiful to see all those flowers on plates. I was curious to hear what was your favorite flower, and I think people, think when they see flowers on a plate that they'll be like sweet and tasty and stuff like that, and it appears that they're more bitter than sweet. Is that correct?
Yeah, usually you're not going to get a really sweet flower. The wild columbines. My grandson, he loves it when the columbines are in bloom, because once he learned he could eat them, he was like all over those. They do have a little bit of nectar in them that tastes gives you just a hint of sweetness. But I think my favorite flower is probably the first one that I had experience with as an edible flower, and that's the nasturtiums, because they are so vivid in color and have such a nice pop of flavor. But I have to tell you that, like I do with the seasons, my favorite edible flower is whichever one I can pick and put on my plate right now. Just like, so.
Well, you've inspired me to try it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I'm also starting to think of flowers.
It was a good presentation.
Oh, go ahead, Pam, go ahead.
Thank you, Pam.
Oh, I just said that's a good presentation. I enjoyed it. And it was good to know that they aren't all real flavorful, because I was kind of like, what's the big deal here other than they're pretty? So now I know that's it.
The main thing is that they are pretty, because it just adds an extra hint of specialness. I mean, it can make an everyday meal look like something special, and a special meal even more special. So.
Absolutely. So you made me start to think about flowers on our house plants, like Christmas cactus.
I wouldn't. I haven't ever seen those on a list. I don't think. I can't think of any actual house plant that I've seen on an edible flower list.
Right. Okay. And I'm thinking of flowers of shrubs too, hyacinths and hydrangeas, and petals, just the
honeysuckle.
Oh,
and lilac. Honeysuckle, lilac, forsythia.
Oh, right.
I haven't ever seen hydrangeas or some of those others. I would say if you know that the plant is used as an internal medicine or as a culinary herb, that the flower is likely, but maybe not necessarily, okay to eat. They might be extremely, extremely bitter.
Mm.
So I don't know that there's a lot of flowers that would actually be toxic. Some of them might be like some of the herbs, and you would have to eat a whole lot to have a toxic effect.
Mhm.
But
you know-
that being said, I would not eat something that I don't know is edible. I've also those amaranths with the big red
Oh, yeah.
flowers on them. I've also used those,
Okay.
and they have kind of a grainy flavor.
Okay. You know, when you were talking about, I think washing off the pollen, I was thinking of pollen like, you know, salt and pepper, of sprinkling it on.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with the pollen unless you have an allergy. I don't usually like wash it off or anything. But if you have a pollen allergy, you need to be really careful
Sure.
about using flowers.
Sure. Yeah. And sumac, are there any, the sumac flower is not appropriate. I mean, I always think of it as
I
like
would-
a hard cone.
I would presume that sumac flowers are fine because you use the berries,
Mhm.
and I've harvested the berries and dried them and ground them up to flavor Middle Eastern dishes before. So I would presume the flowers can also be eaten, but they're very tiny. I never seem to catch them in actual bloom. It's
Mhm.
always, oh, they've got their berries on them now.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's really a wise suggestion of just go foraging in your yard and go
Mhm.
foraging in the, you know, the prairie and the woods and the, you know, again, places that have not been sprayed, that you know for sure have
Yeah.
not been sprayed or have dust, you know, from the road along it. But you know, you've just got me going, thinking about all kinds of other, you know, plants that bloom. So yeah.
But it's really great to be able to know this and be able to include these flowers. Make sure that some of these flowers are in your flower garden or in your vegetable garden. Like I usually plant some. I mean, I've got calendula and zinnias and nasturtiums growing at the ends of a lot of my vegetable beds, as well as some of the culinary herb. Oregano is another thing you can use the flowers on to give you a nice little oregano pop.
Mhm.
So the culinary herbs and these edible flowers, I like to grow at the edges of my beds, as long as they're not something that's going to try to take over my vegetable beds.
Yeah. Well, this has just been really fabulous, Sandra. Can't thank you enough. I want to second what Pam and Diana mentioned about, you know, what incredible information and wonderful presentation and gorgeous photos, and oh my heavens, I'd like to come to your house someday for a flower salad. I mean, you are such an artist in that vein, shall I say.
Thank
Oh,
you.
is it coming on? We have someone coming on a little late here. Anyway, so thank you ever so much, Sandra. And
You're
just
welcome.
anyone else that this presentation will be on YouTube in a few days after it gets processed. Sharon Ashworth puts all of these on a video, and you can find them at the DC EMG website. I'm forgetting the exact title of the Douglas County Master Gardeners website, but it's at that website. You can find all the videos there and watch the videos at your leisure. So unless there's anything else anyone has to add, I guess we'll say a good afternoon to you and enjoy gardening and foraging for flowers. Thank you, Sandra.
Oh, You're welcome.
Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Pam.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.